Some mistakes don't just ruin a career. They wake up an entire military base. The early morning sun stretched across the sprawling Marine installation just outside Camp Pendleton, casting long shadows over rows of perfectly aligned vehicles as the American flag rippled gently in the cool California breeze. The base was already alive. Marines moved with practiced discipline between buildings, transport trucks rolled across freshly painted roads, and a distant rhythm of boots striking pavement echoed through the crisp morning air. Every second followed a schedule. Every movement carried purpose. It looked like another ordinary day. But in less than 5 minutes, nothing about this place would feel ordinary again. Jamal Richardson adjusted the collar of his gray jacket as he walked steadily toward the main entrance, his worn blue jeans and brown work boots making him appear more like a contractor returning from an early job than someone who belonged inside one of America's most secure military installations. Slung over one shoulder was a simple canvas duffel bag, faded from years of travel. His expression remained calm, almost thoughtful, as if the silence of the morning offered a rare chance to breathe before another demanding day began. Several Marines passing nearby offered polite nods without recognizing him immediately in civilian clothing. Jamal acknowledged each greeting with a quiet smile before continuing toward the security gate. It had been nearly 3 weeks since he had last walked through these gates after completing a classified assignment that had taken him across multiple states. Today was supposed to be simple. Check in, attend a scheduled briefing, review the results of a major security evaluation, then spend the afternoon with the men and women whose readiness depended on every decision made inside this base. None of that would happen the way anyone expected. Standing near the entrance, Officer Tyler Morgan rested one hand on his duty belt while scanning the line of incoming vehicles and pedestrians. Assigned to support local law enforcement around the installation during a joint security exercise, Tyler had spent the morning watching everyone who approached the gate with increasing suspicion. Long hours and recent warnings about unauthorized access had sharpened his instincts, or at least that was what he believed. When his eyes settled on Jamal, something about the casually dressed man immediately captured his attention. A gray jacket, blue jeans, an old duffel bag, walking confidently toward a restricted military entrance without slowing down. Tyler's posture stiffened. Instead of seeing a respected Marine officer returning home, he saw someone who didn't fit the picture he had already created in his own mind. Jamal continued walking at the same measured pace, completely unaware that every step was bringing him closer to a misunderstanding that would soon spread far beyond the security checkpoint. The breeze carried the distant sound of helicopters preparing for routine operations somewhere deeper inside the base while the guard station remained otherwise quiet. Tyler stepped forward, raising one hand. "Sir, stop right there." Jamal immediately stopped, his expression composed, his hands clearly visible. He offered a courteous nod. "Good morning, officer. How can I help you?" Tyler studied him for another long moment, convinced that confidence itself was suspicious. Behind them, several Marines slowed their pace, sensing that something unusual was beginning to unfold. None of them realized they were about to witness a decision that would trigger alarms no one had expected to hear. That morning, Officer Tyler Morgan narrowed his eyes as he studied the man standing a few feet away. The calm voice, the relaxed posture, and the steady eye contact only made him more suspicious. In Tyler's experience, people who wandered too close to a military installation usually became nervous when questioned. Jamal Richardson did not. He simply stood there beneath the bright California sky with both hands visible, waiting respectfully for whatever came next. The quiet confidence unsettled Tyler more than any hurried explanation could have. He took another step forward and glanced briefly at the canvas duffel bag hanging from Jamal's shoulder before returning his attention to the man's face. "Identification," Tyler said. Firmly, Jamal nodded without hesitation. "Of course, officer." Slowly, he reached inside the inner pocket of his gray jacket and removed a leather wallet. Every movement was deliberate, giving Tyler no reason to feel threatened. Jamal opened the wallet and presented several credentials, keeping his expression composed throughout the exchange. Tyler accepted them, but barely glanced at the information before looking back at Jamal instead. Somehow, the ordinary clothing seemed to outweigh everything written on the cards in his hand. To Tyler, the picture in front of him simply did not match the image he expected of someone authorized to enter one of the nation's most secure Marine installations. Behind a security checkpoint, several Marines quietly watched the encounter while pretending to continue their morning routines. A maintenance truck slowed as it passed. Two young lance corporals exchanged uncertain looks before continuing toward headquarters. Nobody interrupted because challenging a civilian law enforcement officer at the gate was unusual, especially during a scheduled security exercise. Jamal remained patient. He had spent more than 2 decades leading Marines through situations that demanded discipline under pressure. Compared to those moments, waiting a few extra minutes at a checkpoint seemed insignificant. Even so, he could sense the growing tension spreading across the entrance. Every passing second attracted more attention. Tyler examined the identification again, his forehead tightening. The credentials appeared authentic, but something about the situation refused to satisfy him. The man standing before him wore faded blue jeans instead of a dress uniform. His jacket showed signs of regular use rather than ceremonial perfection. His boots carried the dust of travel instead of a polished shine. Tyler had already decided that someone dressed like this could not possibly belong at the center of a major military installation. Confirmation bias quietly replaced objective judgment. Jamal noticed the hesitation and spoke with the same calm tone that had never wavered. "If there is any concern, Captain Emily Parker can verify my arrival. She is expecting me this morning." Tyler frowned. The mention of an officer's name sounded rehearsed to him instead of reassuring. "You're not giving instructions here," he replied. "You will stay exactly where you are until I figure out who you really are." Jamal offered a slight nod. "That is your decision, officer." There was no anger in his voice, no frustration, only quiet certainty. The words lingered in the cool morning air longer than Tyler expected. Nearby, a digital clock above the visitor processing center quietly changed to 8:15. Inside the command building nearly half a mile away, Captain Emily Parker glanced at her watch as she prepared briefing materials for a meeting that could not begin without one particular attendee. She expected Colonel Jamal Richardson to arrive at any moment. Instead, an unanswered radio call and an unexpected delay at the front gate were about to set an entirely different chain of events into motion. Captain Emily Parker reviewed the schedule one more time before looking toward the conference room entrance. Every chair had been carefully arranged. Digital maps glowed across the large display screens, showing security zones, emergency response routes, and access control points throughout the installation. Representatives from several Marine units were already gathering for the morning briefing, exchanging quiet conversations while waiting for the meeting to begin. One seat, however, remained empty. It belonged to Colonel Jamal Richardson. Emily glanced at her watch again. Punctuality had always been one of Jamal's defining qualities. In nearly 25 years of service, he had developed a reputation for arriving early, listening carefully, and expecting the same discipline from everyone under his command. If he was running behind schedule, there had to be a reason. She reached for her radio, intending to contact the front gate, but another officer approached with a routine question about logistics. For a few moments, her attention shifted elsewhere. Meanwhile, only a short distance away, Jamal remained standing exactly where Officer Tyler Morgan had instructed him to stay. The warm morning breeze moved gently across the entrance, while more personnel arrived for duty. Several Marines quietly observed the unusual scene without interfering. They recognized professionalism in the way Jamal carried himself, even though his civilian clothing concealed every visible sign of rank. His gray jacket remained zipped against the cool morning air. His faded blue jeans and weathered boots made him appear like an ordinary visitor returning from a long drive, rather than someone whose leadership had shaped the careers of hundreds of Marines. Jamal had chosen those clothes intentionally. After weeks traveling between military facilities and federal offices, he preferred beginning the day without drawing unnecessary attention. Respect, he often told young officers, should never depend on a uniform alone. Tyler continued reviewing the identification cards in his hands, searching for something that justified the suspicion already fixed in his mind. Everything appeared genuine. Every document matched the others. Yet instead of accepting the evidence, he kept looking for reasons to doubt it. His attention drifted repeatedly toward Jamal's appearance instead of the credentials themselves. The line of waiting vehicles slowly grew longer behind the checkpoint. Drivers remained patient, unaware that an increasingly significant delay was unfolding only a few yards ahead. Jamal noticed the accumulating traffic and spoke again with the same measured tone. "Officer, there's an operations briefing scheduled in less than 15 minutes. If you contact headquarters, Captain Emily Parker can confirm everything immediately." Tyler folded his arms. "I will decide who gets contacted." Jamal simply nodded once more. There was no argument, no raised voice, only quiet restraint that somehow made the silence around them even heavier. Across the installation, inside headquarters, General Thomas Walker finished reviewing overnight readiness reports before preparing to attend the security briefing personally. The meeting carried unusual importance because today's presentation would include the final assessment of a comprehensive installation security evaluation conducted over several months. Few people knew that Colonel Jamal Richardson had directed much of that review. Even fewer understood that the evaluation focused on decision-making under pressure rather than equipment alone. Outside, the sound of a helicopter lifting into the clear blue sky briefly echoed across the base before fading into the distance. Tyler barely noticed. His attention remained fixed on the man standing before him. He believed he was preventing a security problem. What he could not see was that every passing minute without verification was quietly becoming part of the very evaluation that would soon reach the highest level of command. The atmosphere at the front gate shifted almost imperceptibly as more Marines arrived for morning duty, each one slowing just enough to notice the unusual delay before continuing on. Conversations that normally centered around training schedules and weekend plans became quiet whispers exchanged over cautious glances. No one wanted to interfere, but everyone sensed that something about the scene felt out of place. Jamal Richardson remained exactly where he had been instructed to stand, his gray jacket moving gently in the coastal breeze while the canvas duffel bag rested at his feet. He showed no sign of impatience. Years of leadership had taught him that composure often revealed more about a person than words ever could. Officer Tyler Morgan interpreted that calm very differently. To him, the lack of nervousness seemed almost rehearsed. He stepped closer, studying Jamal's face as though expecting some hidden emotion to appear. Instead, he found the same steady expression that had greeted him from the beginning. Tyler spoke with growing confidence. "You keep mentioning people inside this base, but anyone can memorize names." Jamal answered politely. "That is true, officer, which is why verification exists." Tyler shook his head before looking toward another security officer several yards away. "I am handling this." His voice carried farther than intended, causing several nearby Marines to glance in their direction once again. Jamal lowered his eyes briefly toward the identification cards still resting in Tyler's hand. "Those credentials should answer your questions." Tyler looked at them for another moment before sliding them into his own notebook instead of returning them. "Not until I know they belong to you." Jamal took a slow breath. There was no frustration in his expression, only quiet disappointment that simple verification had been replaced by assumption. He had spent much of his career teaching younger officers that procedures existed to remove personal bias from important decisions. Watching those procedures quietly ignored at the very entrance of a Marine installation carried an irony that did not escape him. Inside headquarters, Captain Emily Parker finally reached for the secure phone after noticing that Colonel Richardson had still not arrived. The receptionist confirmed there had been no message explaining the delay. Emily frowned. Jamal had never missed a briefing without notice. She requested an immediate status check from the front entrance, but the communications desk reported that routine radio traffic was unusually congested because of the ongoing security exercise. The response would take another few minutes. Back at the checkpoint, Tyler folded his arms while watching Jamal with increasing certainty that he had uncovered something significant. Every passing second strengthened a conclusion he had reached before examining a single piece of evidence. Nearby, a retired Marine veteran visiting the installation quietly observed the exchange from the visitor parking area. After several moments, he approached carefully and addressed Tyler with respectful caution. "Officer, I believe I have seen that gentleman here before." Tyler barely acknowledged him. "Please remain behind the marked lines, sir." The veteran nodded politely and stepped back without another word, though concern remained visible across his face. Jamal offered the older man a grateful smile before returning his attention to Tyler. "Officer Morgan, there is still time to resolve this with one phone call." Tyler answered without hesitation. "I do not need anyone else making decisions for me." At that exact moment, deep inside the installation, a notification quietly appeared on General Thomas Walker's secure operations screen. The scheduled security briefing had officially entered delay status because its lead commander had not checked in. Within seconds, automated protocols began comparing access logs, personnel movements, and gate activity. What started as a simple scheduling discrepancy was about to trigger a chain of procedures designed for situations where something at the installation was no longer unfolding according to plan. Jamal Richardson stood quietly beneath the morning sun as the silence around the checkpoint became heavier than the conversations that had filled it only minutes before. The growing line of vehicles now stretched far beyond the visitor entrance, and even those who knew nothing about military operations could sense that something unusual was unfolding. Drivers checked their watches. Marines exchanged brief glances through open windows. Nobody sounded impatient. Instead, uncertainty slowly replaced routine. Jamal understood exactly how quickly uncertainty could spread through an organization. During years of leading Marines through demanding missions, he had learned that people often followed the emotional tone set by those in authority. That was why he refused to let frustration appear on his face. He looked toward Officer Tyler Morgan once more and spoke with the same calm voice that had never changed since the encounter began. "Officer Morgan, I respect your responsibility to protect this installation, but I strongly recommend that you contact your chain of command now." Tyler answered immediately. "I do not need recommendations from someone whose identity I still cannot confirm." Jamal gave a slight nod. "That is your choice." There was no challenge in the words. No sarcasm, no anger, only quiet acceptance. Somehow, that response unsettled Tyler even more than an argument would have. He had expected excuses. He had expected complaints. Instead, he found someone who seemed strangely confident that time itself would eventually answer every question. A light breeze carried the distant sound of cadence from a morning physical training formation somewhere beyond the administration buildings. The rhythmic calls drifted across the installation before fading into the background again. It reminded Jamal of hundreds of mornings spent watching young Marines develop into disciplined leaders. Every lesson had centered on accountability, patience, and respect. Those values could not simply be worn on a uniform. They had to exist long before anyone earned rank. At headquarters, Captain Emily Parker finally received an incomplete report from the communications desk. The message was brief. A civilian law enforcement officer had temporarily delayed an individual at the main entrance while conducting additional verification. No names were included. Emily frowned. Something about the report did not make sense. Colonel Richardson's arrival had already been confirmed on the morning schedule days earlier. There should have been no additional verification required. She immediately contacted General Thomas Walker's executive assistant, explaining that the lead officer for the security briefing had still not entered the installation. The information reached the general within moments. Thomas Walker looked up from the operations display, his expression becoming noticeably more serious. He requested the live access logs from every security checkpoint. Across the room, several staff officers paused their conversations after noticing this sudden change in the command center's atmosphere. Back at the gate, Tyler slipped Jamal's credentials into an evidence envelope instead of returning them. Until everything is verified, these remain with me. Jamal simply looked at the envelope before meeting Tyler's eyes again. Very well. The retired Marine who had spoken earlier quietly shook his head from the visitor area. He recognized the unmistakable discipline standing before him, even if no rank insignia appeared on the gray jacket. Nearby, one young Marine whispered softly to another, "Something feels wrong about this." Neither of them moved. Neither wanted to interfere with authority. Then, without warning, every conversation stopped. A sharp electronic tone echoed across the installation. 1 second later, another followed. Massive security gates deeper inside the base began sliding into place. Warning lights flashed above restricted roadways. Digital signs instantly changed from routine traffic guidance to access control instructions. Even Officer Tyler Morgan looked toward the interior of the base in surprise as the calm morning transformed into a level of security readiness that few people at the entrance had ever witnessed before. The sharp electronic tone continued to echo across the installation as one security barrier after another moved into position with mechanical precision. Bright warning lights reflected across the pavement, while digital access boards switched from routine traffic information to emergency security protocols. Conversations stopped instantly. Engines were turned off. Every person near the entrance instinctively looked toward the center of the base, searching for an explanation that never came. Officer Tyler Morgan stared through the checkpoint as uniformed military police vehicles appeared in the distance, moving quickly but with complete discipline. This was not panic. It was procedure. That realization unsettled him more than the alarms themselves. Jamal Richardson remained exactly where he had been standing since the encounter began. His expression did not change. He watched the activity with quiet understanding, almost as though he had expected this moment long before the first warning signal sounded. Tyler noticed the calm and narrowed his eyes. "Do you know what is happening?" Jamal answered honestly. "I know the installation is following its security protocols." Tyler took another step closer. "Then tell me why." Jamal looked toward the closed gates before returning his attention to the officer. "That answer belongs to your chain of command." The response was respectful, yet it somehow carried more weight than any explanation Tyler had imagined. Around them, several Marines instinctively straightened their posture as additional military police units reached the outer perimeter. No one appeared frightened. Instead, there was a quiet confidence that every person understood his or her role. Captain Emily Parker stepped out of headquarters moments after receiving confirmation that the delay involved the primary entrance. She entered a government vehicle and instructed the driver to proceed directly to the checkpoint without delay. During the shore drive, she reviewed the electronic access log on a secure tablet. The timeline immediately caught her attention. Colonel Jamal Richardson had been expected inside nearly 20 minutes earlier. His arrival had been registered by the external camera system, but no authorized entry had followed. Instead, the record showed an unexplained verification hold initiated by an outside law enforcement officer. Emily looked up from the screen, her expression becoming increasingly serious. At the command center, General Thomas Walker observed the same information displayed across a larger operations monitor. Every security checkpoint remained secure. Every communications channel functioned normally. Only one irregularity existed across the entire installation: the missing arrival of Colonel Richardson. Thomas quietly folded his hands before giving a single instruction: "Bring me everyone directly involved at the main gate." The operations staff immediately acknowledged the order. Outside, Tyler's radio suddenly came alive with overlapping transmissions requesting status updates from multiple units. He answered confidently that the situation remained under control. Before he could finish speaking, another voice interrupted with unmistakable urgency: "Officer Morgan, remain at your current location. Senior command personnel are en route." Tyler lowered the radio slowly. For the first time that morning, uncertainty reached his expression. He looked back toward Jamal, who remained completely composed despite the growing attention surrounding them. The retired Marine, waiting near the visitor entrance, quietly removed his cap as several military police officers approached the checkpoint with purposeful but measured steps. One young corporal, standing nearby, whispered almost to himself, "Someone important must be arriving." Jamal heard the comment and offered only the faintest smile before looking toward the road leading from headquarters. In the distance, a dark command vehicle emerged between the administration buildings, escorted by military police motorcycles moving in perfect formation. Every Marine who saw the convoy instinctively stopped what they were doing. One after another, they turned toward the approaching vehicles. Officer Tyler Morgan felt his heartbeat quicken. He still believed he had followed procedure. But deep inside, a single question refused to leave his mind. Why would the highest levels of command respond personally to one quiet man wearing nothing more than a gray jacket and blue jeans? The command convoy rolled through the final security barrier with quiet precision before coming to a smooth stop only a few yards from the checkpoint. Every conversation disappeared. Every pair of eyes turned toward the lead vehicle. The door opened, and General Thomas Walker stepped onto the pavement with the calm confidence that came from decades of leadership. Captain Emily Parker followed only seconds behind, holding a secure tablet against her side as several military police officers formed a respectful perimeter without creating unnecessary tension. Officer Tyler Morgan immediately straightened his posture, convinced that senior leadership had arrived to assist with a possible security concern. Before he could speak, General Walker walked directly past him without hesitation. His attention remained fixed on only one person. Jamal Richardson stood exactly where he had been since the first request to stop, his gray jacket lightly moving in the breeze while his canvas bag rested beside his boots. Their eyes met. Without a single word being exchanged, General Walker came to attention and delivered a crisp salute. Captain Emily Parker did the same. Around them, every Marine who recognized what was happening instinctively followed. In one silent moment, dozens of service members stood at attention, facing the man Officer Tyler Morgan had treated as an ordinary visitor. Tyler's expression froze. He looked from the general to Jamal and back again, unable to understand what he was seeing. Jamal returned the salute with quiet professionalism before extending his hand to General Walker. The two men exchanged a brief handshake marked not by ceremony, but by mutual respect earned over many years of service. "Good morning, Colonel Richardson," General Walker said. "We have been waiting for you." Jamal smiled politely. "I apologize for the delay, General. Circumstances changed my schedule." Walker nodded once before turning toward Captain Emily Parker. "Is the briefing ready?" "Yes, sir," Emily answered. "Everyone is assembled." She then looked toward Jamal with visible relief. "Colonel, we were beginning to think something unexpected had happened." Jamal glanced briefly toward Tyler before answering. Something unexpected did happen. The words were calm, free of accusation, yet they carried enough meaning that complete silence settled over the entrance once again. Tyler slowly looked down at the evidence envelope, still containing Jamal's identification. His confidence began to disappear as pieces of the morning finally connected in his mind. General Walker extended his hand without saying another word. Tyler immediately understood and handed over the envelope. Walker opened it, removed the credentials, and examined them for only a second before returning them respectfully to Jamal. "Your identification was valid from the beginning," the general said quietly. Jamal accepted the wallet with a simple nod. There was no satisfaction on his face, only composure. Captain Emily Parker opened the secure tablet and displayed the schedule for everyone standing nearby. Across the top appeared the title of the morning briefing: Installation Wide Security Assessment Final Command Review. Beneath it, one line identified the briefing authority: Lead Evaluator, Colonel Jamal Richardson. Emily looked toward Tyler with a professional but measured expression. Colonel Richardson directed the comprehensive security evaluation for this installation. Today's meeting cannot begin without him because the final assessment belongs to him. Tyler felt the weight of every nearby glance, yet no one spoke with anger. The silence itself carried enough significance. Jamal looked at the young officer for a long moment before speaking in the same steady voice he had used since the beginning. Officer Morgan, every security professional has the duty to ask questions. The greater responsibility is making certain those questions are answered with facts instead of assumptions. No one moved. No one interrupted. Even the morning wind seemed to pause as the meaning of those words settled across the entrance more powerfully than any raised voice ever could. General Thomas Walker allowed the silence to linger for several long seconds before speaking again. Captain Parker, resume normal access procedures. Keep the installation secure, but release the temporary restrictions. Emily acknowledged the order immediately, and within moments the flashing warning lights stopped. The electronic barriers slowly returned to their standard operating positions, while the digital signs switched back to routine traffic guidance. Around the base, Marines resumed their morning responsibilities with the same discipline they had demonstrated during the unexpected lockdown. Yet everyone who had witnessed the events at the front gate knew they had just observed something far more important than a delayed briefing. They had watched a lesson unfold in real time. General Walker turned toward the gathered officers and military police personnel. This morning was never intended to embarrass anyone, he said in a calm voice. It was intended to remind every one of us why procedures exist. Procedures protect people from assumptions. They protect the mission. They protect the integrity of this uniform. His words settled over the checkpoint with quiet authority. Nobody argued. Nobody looked away. Captain Emily Parker opened another file on her secure tablet and displayed the official timeline collected from the installation's access systems. Every event appeared in precise order. The arrival of Colonel Jamal Richardson, the presentation of valid credentials, the repeated recommendation to verify his identity through the chain of command, the growing delay, the automatic security alert triggered when the lead evaluator failed to report for the scheduled command briefing. Every action had been documented. Every opportunity to resolve the situation had been recorded. Nothing had been hidden. Nothing had been exaggerated. Jamal studied the timeline without saying a word. His expression remained thoughtful rather than satisfied. General Walker then addressed Officer Tyler Morgan directly. Your responsibility was to protect this installation, and that responsibility deserves respect. But responsibility also demands humility. The moment evidence no longer supports your first conclusion, the conclusion must change. Tyler lowered his eyes briefly before answering. Yes, General. There was no attempt to defend himself. No effort to shift responsibility elsewhere. The confidence that had guided him earlier that morning had given way to honest reflection. Jamal stepped forward with the same calm demeanor he had shown from the beginning. Officer Morgan. Tyler looked up. Sir. Jamal offered a small, reassuring smile. One difficult morning does not define an entire career. What matters is whether you choose to learn from it. Tyler remained silent for a moment before speaking quietly. I should have verified the information instead of relying on my assumptions. Jamal nodded once. That lesson will serve you far longer than any rank or badge. Nearby, several young Marines listened carefully. Some had expected anger. Others had expected humiliation. Instead, they witnessed restraint, professionalism, and accountability from every level of leadership. Captain Emily Parker noticed their expressions and realized that this unplanned event had become one of the most valuable leadership lessons many of them would ever experience. General Walker finally looked toward the headquarters building where the delayed briefing still waited to begin. Colonel Richardson, he said with a respectful smile, I believe your audience is ready. Jamal picked up his canvas duffel bag and adjusted the collar of his gray jacket before turning toward the command vehicle. As he walked past Officer Tyler Morgan, he paused only long enough to offer one final sentence. The strongest leaders are not the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who recognize them before they become habits. Tyler watched him leave with a completely different understanding than the one he had carried only an hour earlier. The checkpoint gradually returned to normal, but for everyone who had stood there that morning, ordinary routine would never look quite the same again. The command briefing finally began nearly an hour later than planned. Yet no one in the room seemed concerned about the delay anymore. Every officer understood that the events at the front gate had already become the most important lesson of the day. Colonel Jamal Richardson stood before the large operations display, still wearing the same gray jacket and blue jeans he had arrived in earlier that morning. The projector illuminated maps of the installation, security checkpoints, communication networks, and emergency response plans across the screen behind him. He looked around the room before beginning to speak. Every security system is designed to protect people, he said calmly. But every security system is operated by human beings. That means our greatest strength and our greatest vulnerability will always be the decisions we make. The room remained completely silent. No one took their eyes off the speaker. Jamal continued by reviewing months of planning, inspections, and readiness evaluations that had involved hundreds of Marines and civilian personnel. He praised the installation for its discipline, its preparedness, and its professionalism. Then he paused before displaying one final slide. Across the screen appeared a simple sentence. The greatest security risk is not a lack of equipment. It is certainty without verification. No charts followed. No complicated statistics appeared. The message spoke for itself. General Thomas Walker slowly nodded. He knew everyone present understood exactly why those words carried such weight after what had happened only a short time earlier. At the conclusion of the briefing, Walker addressed the room. This morning will not be remembered because our procedures activated correctly. It will be remembered because we were reminded that professionalism requires both vigilance and humility. Around the conference table, officers quietly acknowledged the lesson. Later that afternoon, Officer Tyler Morgan submitted a complete incident report describing every decision he had made from the first contact through the arrival of senior command. He did not omit uncomfortable details. He did not attempt to justify assumptions that had proven incorrect. He accepted responsibility for every choice recorded in the timeline. Before leaving the installation, he requested a brief meeting with Colonel Richardson. Jamal welcomed him without hesitation. Tyler spoke with genuine sincerity. "Colonel, I owe you an apology. I allowed my first impression to become my final conclusion, and I stopped looking at the facts that were right in front of me." Jamal listened quietly before extending his hand. Apologies matter because they acknowledge truth. Growth matters because it changes tomorrow. Tyler shook his hand with deep respect. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but its impact would remain with him throughout his career. Weeks later, new training sessions at the installation included the lessons learned from that morning. The names of those involved were never used. Instead, instructors focused on principles that every Marine, every military police officer, and every civilian partner could apply. Verify before concluding. Listen before judging. Respect every individual. Let evidence guide every decision. Long after the electronic gates reopened and the warning lights disappeared, those principles continued to echo through the installation. Jamal Richardson drove away that evening in the same vehicle he had arrived in, wearing the same gray jacket and blue jeans that had caused someone to underestimate him only hours earlier. Nothing about his appearance had changed. Only the understanding of the people around him had. Sometimes authority wears a uniform, and sometimes it wears ordinary clothes. Character does not need to announce itself because time has a way of revealing the truth. A badge can open a gate. A rank can command a salute. But only integrity earns lasting respect. And on that quiet morning, everyone at the base discovered that the strongest form of authority is never built on appearance. It is built on truth. Please like and subscribe to the channel to hear more stories of justice.